14 days before my wedding, my own father and sister cornered my fiancé, spinning a malicious lie that I had abandoned a secret, illegitimate child just to destroy my relationship and steal our shared future. Instead of starting a desperate screaming match, I maintained an absolute, chilling silence as they handed him fake adoption records until my fiancé calmly stood up, flipped his phone screen around to reveal a hidden security photo, and asked a single question that turned their psychological warfare into their own permanent undoing. The web of toxic family deception completely shattered right then and there, transforming our formal rehearsal dinner into a calculated trap where the real scammers were finally exposed to the world. My name is Nicole, and I had to learn the agonizing truth that sometimes the people who share your genetic DNA will happily invent a horrific, non-existent past just to burn your present life to the ground. The final explosive showdown of this nightmare took place on a humid, tense Friday evening in late August 2023. I was sitting at the head of a beautifully set long banquet table inside a private dining room at a high-end French bistro in downtown Austin, Texas. The room was decorated with elegant white roses, flickering candles, and the soft ambient hum of jazz music, but the air felt entirely frozen. Surrounding the table were 30 people, my closest friends, my future in-laws, and the 2 biological relatives who had spent the last 2 weeks trying to systematically ruin my reputation. My father, Marcus, and my older sister, Chloe. Marcus was a cold, controlling patriarch who ran a mid-sized commercial construction firm, and Chloe was his fiercely loyal, entitled duplicate. For years, I had been the family's unpaid operational anchor, quietly running the back-end finances of Marcus's struggling business while Chloe spent the corporate accounts on luxury vacations and country club memberships. When I met my fiancé, Julian, a brilliant, fiercely protective software architect from a deeply respected, wealthy family, Marcus realized he was losing his free labor and his ultimate financial safety net. Even worse, Julian and I had recently bought a beautiful piece of suburban real estate entirely with our own hard-earned savings, completely independent of Marcus's control. Driven by a volatile mix of pure financial desperation and deep-seated jealousy, Marcus and Chloe decided that if they couldn't control me, they would ensure I was left with absolutely nothing. Their psychological assault began exactly 14 days before our scheduled wedding date. Marcus and Chloe had cornered Julian at a local upscale coffee shop, pretending to be deeply concerned family members who could no longer harbor a dark, dangerous secret. "She's a liar, Julian, always has been," Marcus had said, leaning across the table with a perfectly practiced expression of heavy, grandfatherly sorrow. "We've tried to shield the world from her instability, but as a man of honor, I cannot let you walk blindly into this marriage. She has a secret child, a bastard child she abandoned in a rural clinic 6 years ago just to preserve her career." Chloe had leaned in right after him, her voice a sharp, dramatic whisper that dripped with manufactured sympathy. "Don't let her trap you too, Julian. She wiped our family bank accounts to pay off the private adoption agency to keep the papers sealed. She's using your family status to erase her disgusting past." They had handed Julian a thick, convincing folder filled with expertly forged medical documents, altered birth certificates from a defunct county clinic, and falsified wire transfer receipts designed to look like I had spent thousands covering up a secret pregnancy. It was a calculated, vicious character assassination. When Julian brought the folder home to our apartment that evening, his face was pale, but his eyes weren't filled with doubt. They were filled with a quiet, burning intensity. He knew my character. He knew my past, and he knew the relentless greed of my relatives. We didn't waste our breath calling them, screaming at them, or giving them the satisfaction of a panicked, defensive reaction. Instead, we spent the next 2 weeks quietly laying a massive, invisible trap, letting them believe their malicious lie had worked perfectly so they would walk right into their own public execution. The trap sprung at our formal rehearsal dinner. Marcus and Chloe had arrived looking completely triumphant, wearing expensive designer outfits they couldn't afford, fully expecting to see Julian's wealthy parents coldly snubbing me or announcing a sudden cancellation of the wedding. They took their seats across from us, casting smug, mocking glances at me while making loud, passive-aggressive remarks about honesty and purity to the surrounding guests. Halfway through the main course, Marcus stood up, tapping his wine glass with a silver fork to command the attention of the entire room. The private dining hall fell completely quiet as the guests turned their heads toward the family patriarch. "I want to welcome Julian's wonderful family to this gathering," Marcus began, his voice booming with a false sense of pride. "We are gathered here to celebrate a union, but as the head of the family, I believe a marriage built on a foundation of hidden shame and abandoned responsibilities cannot stand. Julian, I think it's time you tell your parents the truth about the woman you are about to marry, based on the legal files I handed you 14 days ago." A heavy, suffocating silence dropped over the banquet hall. My future mother-in-law paused her glass mid-air, her brow furrowing in deep confusion. The aunts and uncles looked at each other, whispering in shocked anticipation. Chloe sat tightly in her chair, a malicious, victorious grin spreading right across her face, eagerly waiting for my public humiliation. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't offer a single word of defense. I just sat there perfectly still, cutting a piece of my steak with absolute calmness. Suddenly, Julian slowly stood up from his seat right next to me. He didn't look angry. His expression was completely unreadable, cold, and entirely corporate. He reached into his tailored suit pocket, pulled out his smartphone, and tapped the screen twice. With a smooth, deliberate movement, he flipped the phone around, extending it straight across the white linen tablecloth toward my father and sister. The screen displayed a high-definition, time-stamped security photograph of a woman standing inside a local specialized legal forgery office holding a stack of fraudulent medical seals and birth certificates. The face of the woman in the photo was crystal clear. It was Chloe. Julian looked straight into my father's eyes, his voice echoing through the dead-silent room like an iron gavel. "Is this the child, Marcus? Is this the abandoned secret you were talking about?" Marcus's false grandfatherly sorrow vanished instantly. His mouth opened slightly, his eyes widening in pure shock as he stared at the high-definition image of his eldest daughter caught red-handed in the act of manufacturing fraudulent legal documents. Chloe's malicious grin froze on her face, the color rapidly draining from her cheeks until she looked like a hollow, terrified ghost. "Julian, what is the meaning of this?" Marcus stammered, his confident posture instantly fracturing. "That's just Chloe at an office supply store. This has nothing to do with the abandoned baby records we showed you." Those abandoned baby records were traced back to a digital template purchased on an underground dark web marketplace using your corporate credit card, Marcus, Julian said, his voice dropping into a chillingly calm, dangerous register. "We didn't just look at the papers you gave me. We hired a certified federal digital forensics team the exact night you tried to poison my mind. We tracked the digital metadata of those forged clinic documents straight to Chloe's personal laptop." "No, this is a setup. Melanie is trying to frame us because she's desperate," Chloe hysterically shrieked, standing up so fast she knocked her wine glass over, sending dark red liquid puddling across the pristine table. She looked wildly around the room at the horrified faces of our guests, her defensive wall completely shattering into dust. "The only people running a setup in this room are the two of you," I finally said, standing up to face them, my voice completely steady and entirely devoid of warmth. "You wanted to ruin my life because I stopped funding your failing construction firm. But while you were busy playing games with fake children, Julian and I were busy working with the state licensing boards and the forensic auditors. I tapped my own phone, and the large presentation screen at the front of the dining room, which was supposed to show a romantic slideshow of our childhood photos, instantly switched to a live display of certified corporate bank records, internal tax filings, and an official notice of a pending grand jury investigation. Marcus, you didn't just forge a birth certificate to fund Chloe's lifestyle and keep your business afloat. You have been systematically committing corporate tax evasion, masking personal luxury expenses as commercial construction deductions, and illegally utilizing my digital signature on 3 separate fraudulent bank loan applications totaling over $1.8 million. The forensic audit was completed 48 hours ago. The entire room went completely chaotic. Julian's father stood up, his face dark with immense corporate authority. Marcus, you brought financial fraud and malicious extortion to our family's table. Get the hell out of this room before I ensure you never work in the state of Texas again.
Wait, please, we can explain. It was just a family dispute, Marcus pleaded, his hands trembling violently as his knees began to buckle under the crushing weight of the financial exposure. He reached out toward Julian's parents, his face twisting into a mask of pure panic. "There is nothing left to explain to us, Dad," I said, looking down at him with absolute, unadulterated disgust. "You can explain your corporate balance sheets to the state investigators waiting in the lobby." Right on absolute cue, the heavy oak doors of the private dining room were thrown open with total legal authority. 3 plainclothes investigators from the state's Financial Crimes Division stepped into the room, accompanied by 2 uniformed police officers. They walked past the scattered plates and the ruined floral arrangements, straight over to the other side of the table where Marcus and Chloe stood completely paralyzed in terror. Chloe began to scream hysterically, flailing her arms as the female officer forced her to turn around, snapping heavy steel handcuffs tightly around her manicured wrists. She was formally read her rights and arrested for identity theft, criminal forgery, and commercial extortion. Marcus offered absolutely no resistance whatsoever. He collapsed heavily back into his dining chair, staring down at the table in complete, stunned silence, as the lead investigator formally served him with a warrant for grand larceny, corporate tax fraud, and forgery of financial instruments. They were marched out of the high-end bistro in full, clear view of the restaurant patrons and the gathering crowd outside on the sidewalk. The revenge was absolute, public, and completely devastating to their entire existence. Within 5 months of that rehearsal dinner, Marcus's construction firm officially filed for Chapter 7 liquidation, completely collapsing into absolute dust. Because the digital forensics and banking audits we provided left absolutely zero room for a creative legal defense, Marcus was forced to sign a harsh plea deal, resulting in a mandatory 6-year prison sentence in a federal correctional facility. Chloe was sentenced to 3 years of executive probation and 400 hours of community service. Her high society social standing permanently ruined, and her personal credit entirely destroyed by the massive court-ordered restitution fines. Now I sit on the beautiful, sunlit back porch of our suburban estate, watching the sunset over the Texas hills, completely at peace. Standing right next to me is Julian, my husband, holding 2 cups of coffee, his face bright with a deep, unwavering love. Our wedding day was beautiful, flawless, and completely free from the toxic shadows of the family I left behind. My father and sister tried to use a malicious, fabricated lie to break my spirit and steal my joy, but by keeping our heads clear, letting the cold, hard data do the talking, and striking at the exact second they felt completely victorious, we didn't just protect our future, we permanently dismantled their entire world. My personal advice to anyone listening to this: never allow the toxic desperation of entitled family members to force you into a defensive, emotional screaming match when they try to weaponize malicious lies against your character. It is a profoundly heartbreaking, agonizing reality to accept, but a biological parent or sibling can sometimes view your personal happiness and independent success
as a direct threat to their financial safety net, turning them into ruthless saboteurs who will happily invent a horrific past just to control your present. A shared last name or a birth certificate does not buy someone the right to run a corporate character assassination against you, and you should never feel a single ounce of guilt for using the absolute weight of the law to crush their malice. When toxic people try to poison the minds of the people who truly love you, do not waste your breath begging for their approval or crying over their betrayal. Trust in the strength of your independent character. Document every single financial inconsistency and let the cold, hard data do the talking at the exact moment they believe they have won everything. True family isn't defined by the people who share your bloodline while actively trying to drain your resources. It is defined solely by the partner and the loved ones who stand fiercely as an unbreakable shield by your side to protect your peace when the wolves gather. Walking away from a toxic dynamic and letting the legal consequences of their own greed ruin them is not a betrayal. It is the highest, most profound act of self-preservation and dignity you can ever give to your own future. Take this story as your ultimate wake-up call to stand tall, secure your independent assets, and aggressively put your own peace first today, because your happiness is worth more than any toxic family tie.